She lost her son, but her dog discovered something that changed everything. Before the story begins, comment below which city you're watching the video from. We love getting to know our viewers. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more exciting stories. Enjoy the story and see you soon. Everything I loved disappeared in a second, and the worst part wasn't seeing it fade away, but not knowing if I'd ever breathe again. Clara stared at the photo of Diego, the last one she'd taken before the accident. He was smiling, his laughter echoing in her ears like a distant sound. But that smile, that laugh, it was all gone now. The emptiness she felt was so deep that she didn't even know if there was a bottom to reach. Diego was gone. The image of the accident still haunted her mind, the screeching of the brakes, the impact, the screams, and then silence. A silence so complete it seemed to swallow the entire world. That morning, Clara had woken up, hoping the pain was just a nightmare, but reality hit her like a hammer. Her son, her only son, was dead. Since that day, her life had lost all meaning. There was no food that tasted right, no days that felt bright. Everything was dark, as if the sun had turned off for her. People around her tried to comfort her, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could heal the wound that opened every time she thought of Diego. The only thing left of him was Luna, Diego's dog, a grey mutt who, for some reason, had been by her side through all those hard moments. Luna's loyalty was unwavering, and her presence was, in a way, the only link Clara still had to her son. But as if fate wanted to deal her a final blow, Luna disappeared soon after the accident. There was no trace of her, no paw prints in the park where Diego used to take her to play, and Clara, in her desperation, sank even deeper into the abyss of loneliness. Every morning when she got up, she would walk through the house, searching with her eyes for the corner where Luna used to sleep. She felt the dog's absence like a punch in the chest, a physical pain that wouldn't go away. Clara's soul, already shattered by Diego's death, now felt completely empty, without hope. One morning, as she was drinking coffee, her phone vibrated. At first, she didn't want to look. What could the world offer her now? What could possibly matter? Another call, another message. But something inside her made her pick up the phone. It was a message from a woman, someone named Rosa. The elderly woman, whom Clara didn't know, said she had seen Luna with a young girl named Camilla, a street girl who lived on the outskirts of the city. Clara couldn't believe it. How could Luna be with someone else? How could there be any hope after everything she had lost? Yet something in Rosa's words sparked a flicker of curiosity, a small light in the middle of the darkness. Rosa said that Luna and Camilla shared a strange connection, something that couldn't be explained, something beyond what a simple glance could say. "It's like they're one soul," the woman said. "What happened between them is something you just can't understand." Clara didn't hesitate for a second. She put on her coat, ran out of the house, and with her heart pounding, she headed for the park Rosa had mentioned. She didn't know what she'd find, or if it made any sense to keep searching for Luna, but something pushed her to do it, something she couldn't explain. When she arrived at the park, she saw her. Camilla, a 17-year-old girl, thin, with eyes filled with deep sadness, was sitting on a bench with Luna by her side. The dog, upon seeing Clara, lifted her head but didn't run toward her. She didn't move. It was as if she didn't recognize her, but something inside Clara made her step closer, wordlessly, with fear gripping her chest. "Luna?" Clara asked, her voice breaking, while the dog stared at her, as though waiting for something. Camilla looked up at Clara, and in her eyes Clara saw something she couldn't identify, a mix of fear, sadness, and something more, something so deep it scared her to get closer. "Do you know Luna?" Camilla asked. Her voice was soft, but at the same time it was tough, like she was used to defending herself from everything around her. Clara nodded, Her heart was pounding in her chest, her mind a whirlwind. But she wasn't ready for what Camilla was about to say. "I have a scar on my chest," Camilla said, pointing to her torn clothes, which revealed a small piece of skin. Clara didn't understand at first, until she saw the mark. An identical mark to Diego's, the same birthmark he'd had since he was born. In that moment, Clara felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. How could Camilla have that scar? Why was Luna with her? What did all this mean? But the answer, like everything in her life since that accident, wasn't something simple. Something much bigger than herself was about to be revealed. Clara couldn't take her eyes off the scar on Camilla's chest. It was so exact, so identical to the one Diego had had since he was a child, that for a moment she thought she was dreaming. The world around her seemed to fade away, and all that remained was the point where their gazes met, frozen in astonishment and fear. Camilla, seeing the petrified look on Clara's face, slowly stood up from the bench. Luna, who had still been lying next to her, also stood up, but this time she didn't walk toward Clara. Instead, she stayed still, watching Diego's mother with an intensity that was almost human. "Why do you have that scar?" Clara managed to say, her throat tight with disbelief. Camilla, sensing the urgency in Clara's voice, lowered her gaze. The sadness in her eyes ran deep, as if she was carrying a secret she had never told anyone. The young woman took a step back, and Clara, for reasons she couldn't understand, followed her. "I don't know how to explain it," Camilla said, her voice trembling. I'm Camilla. Years ago, I had an accident. I was on the street with nothing when a car hit me. I was almost dead." Clara felt like her legs couldn't support her. Each word Camilla spoke was a direct blow to her heart. An accident? What kind of accident? How could this be related to her son? Camilla, as if sensing the question Clara hadn't dared to ask, continued. "They did surgery on me. A heart transplant. Mine wasn't working anymore, so they gave me another one, but I never knew whose it was." Clara took a step back, horror written all over her face. A heart transplant? And if? The young woman kept talking, unaware of Clara's reaction, lost in her own thoughts. "I always had strange dreams after the surgery, of a little boy who would talk to me. His name was Diego, like his memory. I didn't understand any of it, but I felt like he knew me. It was like a part of him was still alive in me, but I didn't know why." Clara felt the blood freeze in her veins. Diego? How could that be possible? The memories of her son, his smile, his laughter, the happy moments they shared, flooded her mind. And now, this young woman in front of her was saying that he lived on in some corner of her soul. "How can you be so sure of what you're saying?" Clara asked, unsure if she wanted to hear the answer. Her voice broke, but her gaze remained fixed on the scar on Camilla's chest. Camilla swallowed, and then, with a gesture full of fear and vulnerability, she lifted her shirt and showed her scar without saying another word. Clara saw with horror how the birthmark on Camilla's chest perfectly matched the one Diego had had. A reality check that left her breathless. "It's impossible," Clara murmured. Her heart was pounding, and her mind was struggling to process what she had just heard. The connection between Camilla and Diego was more than evident, but the fact that this connection existed through a transplanted heart was too much to take in. Luna, meanwhile, slowly walked over to Clara, and for a moment, something changed in her gaze. The dog seemed to understand what was happening. It was as if Luna, Diego's dog, had been waiting for Clara to uncover what she had feared, what had been hidden in the shadows of her grief. Clara felt a knot in her stomach, but she stepped closer to Camilla. She didn't know if she was doing the right thing, if she should believe her, or if all of this was just madness. But a part of her, a very deep part, understood that she couldn't ignore what she had just discovered. Are you? Clara asked, her voice broken. Do you carry my son's heart? Camilla looked at her eyes full of tears, and nodded slowly. Yes, she answered, with a fragility that reflected the weight of everything she had lived through. And I don't know how, but I feel like Diego is with me. It's like he's living inside me. The silence between them was overwhelming. Clara didn't know how to react. How could part of Diego still be alive in another person? How could her son, who was no longer in this world, still be present through the beats of a stranger's heart? Luna, who had until now remained on the sidelines, approached Clara and with a soft bark lay down at her feet. It was as if the dog was telling her that all of this had a purpose, that somehow everything that had happened made sense, even if Clara couldn't comprehend it yet. But one thing was clear: Clara's life had just taken an irreversible turn. She hadn't only lost her son, now somehow Diego's heart was beating inside someone else, and that, more than anything, was a mystery that only fate could explain. Clara stood in silence, watching Camilla with a mix of disbelief and awe. The young woman's words kept echoing in her head like an unbearable echo. My son's heart lives in you. She couldn't stop thinking about it, as if reality itself had shifted in that moment, taking an unexpected turn that made her feel like her whole world had become unrecognizable. For several long seconds they stayed there, neither daring to break the silence. Luna, the dog, was still beside Camilla, staring at Clara with an odd intensity, as if waiting for her to make the decision that would change everything. Finally, Clara found the courage to speak. Why? The question came out broken, as if she couldn't form it properly. Her hands were trembling, but she tried to keep her composure. Why are you telling me this? Camilla looked up, and for a moment her eyes shone with something Clara couldn't identify, some kind of sadness mixed with fear. The young woman took a step back, and the dog, as if understanding her need for space, moved a little farther away as well. I don't know how to explain it, Camilla said, her voice softer than Clara expected. I didn't understand either until I saw Luna. I saw how she looked at you, how she was searching for you. She knew you had something to do with all this. Despite the pain and confusion Clara felt, she watched the dog closely. Luna had stayed still, watching her from a distance, not moving from her spot next to Camilla. Somehow the dog seemed to understand that her presence there had a deeper meaning, something Clara still couldn't quite comprehend. It's a strange connection, Camilla continued. I never knew who the child was who gave me his heart. But now, with Luna here, with you too, I feel like, in some way, Diego is still here, in me. Camilla's words resonated in Clara's mind. Diego is still here. It was a thought both terrifying and beautiful at the same time, something that overflowed her capacity to understand. How could it be possible? How could her son be alive in some way, inside someone else, breathing in another body, pulsing in the chest of a girl she barely knew? The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, but to Clara, everything seemed covered by a thick shadow. Her thoughts were a mess, and her heart a sea of emotions. She wanted to run, escape it all, but she couldn't. Something kept her there, rooted to the ground, watching this young woman who, though not her daughter, carried such a fundamental part of Diego. What am I supposed to do with this? Clara asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Her eyes filled with tears. The confusion was unbearable. How could she live with the idea that Camilla carried her son's heart? Camilla lowered her gaze, and for a moment she seemed as lost as Clara. With a deep sigh, she spoke again. I don't know what to do, Clara. This is both a gift and a curse at the same time, she said with sadness. I never asked for this, never asked to have someone else's heart, but now that I know, I feel like like something connects me to you, like something ties us together." Clara stayed there looking at the young woman, trying to understand what was happening, what it meant. The presence of Luna, so close, gave her some comfort, though the pain remained. How could she trust Camilla? The answer seemed so simple and so complicated at the same time. Camilla wasn't her daughter, but she carried part of her son inside her. The sun began to set, painting the sky with a soft orange hue that contrasted with the darkness Clara felt within herself. She took a deep breath, trying to calm down, and then looked at Luna, who was staring at her intently. "How can I believe all of this?" Clara murmured, more to herself than to Camilla. Camilla moved closer slowly, looking at Luna as well, and then at Clara. "Maybe you don't have to believe, Clara," she said softly. "Maybe you just have to feel it." Clara, with her heart pounding in her chest, took a step forward, feeling the connection of something greater, something she couldn't explain, but that seemed to be right in front of her. Maybe she couldn't understand everything that was happening, but something deep inside her soul told her that, however painful it was, there was some hope in this encounter. For the first time in a long time, Clara felt that Diego's love, in some way, was still alive. Not in the way she had dreamed, but there in the presence of Camilla and Luna, something was changing. Something was being born, even though she didn't fully understand it yet. And though her heart remained shattered, Clara began to feel that maybe life was giving her a chance she hadn't asked for, but in some way needed to take. Clara couldn't stop looking at Camilla, her mind trapped between disbelief and confusion. What now? How could she move forward with this knowledge that had crashed upon her like an avalanche? Diego's heart was still beating, but not in her son's chest. It was beating in the chest of a stranger. For a few moments, the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the silence and stillness of the park. Luna, who had been silently watching Clara with unwavering loyalty, came closer to her side again. The dog didn't touch her, but sat by her feet, as if waiting for a sign, as if she understood that something important was happening. "And now what?" Clara whispered, almost to herself as she bent down to pet Luna, seeking comfort in her presence. Camilla, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope, watched Clara in silence for a long moment. Finally, she took a deep breath and spoke in a broken voice. "I don't know what to do, Clara. I don't know what this means, but I feel like it's not a coincidence that I found you." Camilla lifted her gaze, and Clara saw a sadness in her eyes so deep it almost made her feel guilty for not knowing how to help her. Clara, trapped in her own pain, didn't know whether to offer words of comfort or to ask more about this strange connection. But something inside her told her that, even if she didn't understand what was happening, she needed to listen. "A long time ago," Camilla began, her eyes welling up with tears. "A long time ago, I lived on the streets. People ignored me, treated me like I didn't exist. But then that accident changed my life. When I woke up, they told me I'd survived because I was given a new heart, but they never told me whose it was. I never asked. I just knew that from that moment on, my life stopped being mine. I felt things, dreams, memories that weren't mine. And now I understand that all of that has to do with you, with Diego." Camilla's words cut deeply into Clara. She couldn't help but feel a mixture of disbelief, but also something else, something that was beginning to feel like acceptance. "What do you remember about those dreams?" Clara asked, hoping to understand more, even though she wasn't sure she was ready to face all the truth. Camilla closed her eyes, as though doing so would bring the most vivid memories to the surface. "It's strange. They're like fragments, images of a life that's not mine, but one I feel I should have lived," she said, her voice trembling. "Sometimes I dream of a house, of a mother waiting for me, of a boy calling to me. Her voice cracked. That boy, it's Diego. And even though I don't know what it means, I feel like his soul is here, inside me. Clara, hearing those words, felt the world begin to spin around her again. The connection Camilla felt wasn't just a physical bond. It was something deeper, something that transcended logic. It was as if her son's soul, in some way, had found a way to live on, to move forward. Clara swallowed hard. Despite the confusion, she felt something inside her telling her she needed to stay close to Camilla. Even though her son was no longer here, something in her sensed that she might find some kind of solace in this young woman who now carried his heart. I can't change what happened, Camilla, Clara said, her words coming out haltingly. I can't fill the emptiness Diego left, but maybe we can find a way to move forward, to heal together. Camilla looked at her, surprised by Clara's words, as if she couldn't believe someone so lost in her own pain could offer her a chance. Do you really believe that? Camilla asked, her voice breaking as if her life were about to take an unexpected turn. Clara nodded slowly, feeling her heart calm for the first time in months. I don't know. But what I know is that we can't keep living in the past. Neither you nor I. Diego is somewhere, in us, and even though we'll never replace him, maybe we can find a way to move forward, to live for him, to live with him. Camilla, with tears in her eyes, took a step toward Clara. It was a tentative, hesitant step, but it was a step toward something new, towards an understanding that, even though it wasn't complete, was starting to take shape. Clara looked at her, and for a moment, something shifted inside her. She wasn't Diego's mother standing before Camilla now. She was a woman who, though broken, was ready to begin again. So, do you want to help me? Camilla asked, her voice full of hope, as if she had finally found someone who saw her not as a lost soul, but as someone with a purpose. Clara didn't respond right away. She looked at Luna, who was watching both women as if guiding them towards something. Then, finally, she looked at Camilla. Yes, let's start over, together. And for the first time since Diego's death, Clara felt that maybe something beautiful could emerge from the pain. That, though she would never replace her son, somehow, in this young woman and in Luna, she could find a way to heal. The following days were strange, heavy with a silent tension. Clara invited Camilla to her house, a gesture that, though well-intentioned, was filled with uncertainty. The house, which had once been filled with so many laughs and happy moments with Diego, now seemed emptier than ever. The echo of his absence reverberated through every corner, and although Clara tried to hold on to the idea that helping Camilla could bring some light, there was something inside her she couldn't forget. The young woman had started staying on the couch in the living room, and Luna, the dog, never left her side. It was as if, deep down, Luna understood that her task wasn't over, that she had to look after the girl who now carried a piece of the child she had loved. Meanwhile, Clara spent her hours lost in thought, staring at the photos of Diego that adorned the walls. Every time her eyes landed on his face, she felt a sharp pain in her chest, a mix of love and sorrow so overwhelming it left her breathless. One evening, as Clara prepared dinner, she saw Camilla sitting on the couch, lost in her thoughts. There was something in her expression that made Clara think the young woman was battling her own demons. In her eyes, there was an emptiness she couldn't hide, as if guilt was eating her alive. "Camilla," Clara said, not fully turning around. "Do you want to talk?" The young woman lifted her gaze, surprised, as if she hadn't expected Clara to invite her to open up. Then, with a deep sigh, she got up and slowly approached. "I don't know what to do, Clara," Camilla said, her voice wavering. I've spent my whole life feeling like I don't belong anywhere, like my heart isn't mine. And now, with all this, I feel like I'm betraying Diego." Clara set the spoon down on the stove and turned to look at her. The vulnerability in Camilla's eyes deeply moved her. "You're not betraying anyone. You're trying to find your place in the world." Clara paused, considering her words. "The fact that you carry Diego's heart doesn't mean you have to be him. You are you, Camilla, and you have the right to live, to be happy." Camilla looked at her, but the uncertainty still lingered in her gaze. "But what if I never make it?" she whispered. "What if I can't find myself?" Clara felt a wave of empathy for the young woman. She knew what it was like to get lost in pain, in emptiness. She knew what it was like to feel broken, as if nothing could ever fit again. She herself had been there after Diego's death, but now, with Camilla in front of her, something inside Clara told her that, at the very least, she could help the young woman find her way. "You don't have to have all the answers right now, Camilla," Clara said softly. "All I'm asking is that you let me help you, that you let me show you that you're not alone. And if you ever feel lost, I'll be here." Camilla nodded slowly, her eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and sadness. "Thank you," she said in a low voice. The silence that followed was comfortable, but still thick with the same tension that had always been present. Both knew that, while they were beginning to understand each other, there was still a long road ahead. Their relationship wouldn't be easy. Clara didn't know if she would ever be able to look at Camilla without thinking of Diego, but something in her heart told her she had to try. That night, as Clara and Camilla had dinner together, Luna lay at their feet, as if keeping watch over them. The dog, who had always been Diego's guardian, now seemed to be fulfilling an even greater mission, piecing together the broken fragments of their lives. However, as night fell, Clara couldn't help but let the darkness of the past catch up with her. As she prepared for bed, she stopped in front of the photo of Diego on the wall, his face radiant and full of life. A lump formed in her throat. Was healing possible? Could she ever find peace with everything she had lost? But when she turned to go to her room, she saw Camilla standing in the doorway of the living room. The young woman looked at her with a serene expression, but Clara knew that inside an internal battle was raging. I'm happy to be here, Clara," Camilla said, her voice soft, surprising Clara. "I never imagined I would find someone who understood me like this." Clara smiled, though there was a sadness in her eyes. "I'm happy too, Camilla," she said with a sigh. "I am too." As she prepared to sleep, something in her heart, though painful, began to shift. Maybe in the end, it didn't matter if Camilla was a substitute for Diego, or if they simply shared an inexplicable connection. Maybe what really mattered was that, together, they could find a way to heal. And for the first time since the death of her son, Clara felt that there was a small spark of hope amidst the darkness. The morning dawned grey and cold, as if the weather was trying to reflect the internal storm that Clara still couldn't understand. As she made coffee, her thoughts remained focused on Camilla and the strange bond they shared, one that, in some way, connected them both to Diego. What had started as a simple curiosity was now transforming into an urgent need to understand, to find answers. Camilla had begun helping around the house, timidly, but with a determination that surprised Clara. Sometimes, when the young woman passed by her, Clara could feel the weight of a story that didn't belong to her, a story that, for some reason, now had to be shared. "Clara," Camilla called from the living room, interrupting the woman's thoughts. "Can you come for a moment?" Clara put down what she was doing and walked toward the living room, where she found Camilla looking at something in her hands. It was an old jacket Diego had worn in his last months, one of the few items Clara had kept, unable to part with them. Camilla held it delicately, as if afraid it would fall apart in her hands. "What's going on?" Clara asked, surprised by the scene. Camilla slowly looked up and with a whisper said, "Look." Clara approached and saw, with a mix of disbelief and amazement, that Camilla had a scar on her chest, right where Diego had had his birthmark. It was a strange scar, almost identical to the one her son had, a mark he had carried since the day he was born. Clara fell silent, unable to find the words. Is it his?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Camilla nodded, her face pale from the tension of the moment. "Yes," she answered, eyes full of tears. "It's the same mark, right? The same one Diego had." Clara's world shattered in that instant. It was as if everything she had been trying to avoid, everything she didn't want to accept, had finally been revealed in the most terrifying way. Camilla didn't just carry Diego's heart, she also had a mark on her body that belonged to him. "How?" Clara asked, but couldn't find the words to continue. Camilla looked at her with deep sadness in her eyes, as if she understood what was going through Clara's mind. "I don't know, Clara." Her voice broke. "I don't know how to explain it. All I know is that when they did the transplant, I felt like something in me changed. Not just my body, but my soul. Sometimes I feel like Diego is with me, like his memories are mine." Clara stepped back, unable to fully process what she was hearing. The pain in her chest intensified, as if an invisible weight was crushing her. Everything she had fought to understand, to accept, now hit her with an uncontrollable force. Not only had she lost her son, but in some way she was now facing the life of a stranger who at the same time carried Diego's essence within her. "I don't know if I can keep going with this, Camilla," Clara said, trembling. This is too much." Camilla, sensing Clara's distress, tried to approach, but Clara stepped back, avoiding her touch. "I'm sorry," Camilla whispered. "I didn't want to cause you more pain. But it's the truth, Clara. I didn't ask for this. It just happened." Clara took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She knew she couldn't blame Camilla. The young woman hadn't asked for any of this, but still, the connection they shared was so deep, so inexplicable, that it felt unbearable. It felt as if by accepting Camilla, she was accepting Diego's death in a way she wasn't ready to face. "I don't know if I can forgive myself for this," Clara murmured, looking down, her voice broken. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you and not see Diego, not feel like you're replacing him." Clara's words caused Camilla to step back, scared, not knowing what to say to calm her. For a moment, both women stood in silence, trapped in the complexity of their emotions. But then Luna got up and walked slowly toward Clara, placing her head on her lap. The dog looked at the woman with an intensity that only she could convey, and Clara, feeling the warmth of her presence, took a deep breath. Something inside her calmed, if only for a moment. Maybe it's not about replacing Diego," Clara said, her voice trembling as she stroked Luna's head. "Maybe it's about learning to live with the pain, with the loss, but also with what Diego left behind. And if you have a part of him, maybe it's not so bad." Camilla, hearing those words, looked up surprised. "Do you really believe that?" she asked, eyes full of hope. Clara nodded slowly, though she wasn't completely sure of what she was saying. "Yes, I think so." And though she didn't have all the answers, though the path still felt uncertain and full of shadows, Clara felt for a moment that something had shifted inside her, something that, though painful, brought her closer to accepting life as it came. The scars on their hearts, hers and Camilla's, though they could never be erased, now shared a common story, the story of a heart that continued to beat, in some way, through both of them. The week passed in a whirlwind of emotions that Clara didn't know how to handle. There were days when she felt closer to Camilla, as if, in some way, the young woman were an extension of herself. But there were others, when the loss of Diego became unbearable, and Camilla's presence made her feel as though her son was being replaced, even though she knew that wasn't really what was happening. One afternoon, while Clara was in the garden, her mind filled with questions and doubts, she heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, she found Rosa, the elderly woman who had been the first to tell her about Luna and her connection to Camilla. The woman, with grey hair and a wise expression, carried a crumpled paper bag in her hands. "Clara, my dear, I brought you something," Rosa said in a soft voice, almost as if she knew exactly what Clara needed to hear at that moment. Clara invited her inside, though she wasn't sure what the elderly woman had brought with her. Rosa sat down on the armchair with a sigh, looking around as if searching for something in particular. Finally, she pulled a small package wrapped in cloth from the bag. Clara looked at her, confused. "What is this?" Clara asked as Rosa slid it toward her. Rosa looked at her intently, as if waiting for the right moment to speak. This is something that belongs to you, Clara, something you should know," she said, her voice low. "I found it some time ago after the accident. I didn't know if I should give it to you, but now, seeing everything that's happening, I think it's the right time." Clara opened the package slowly, feeling her heart beat faster. Inside the cloth she found a small wooden box. She opened it, and what she saw left her speechless. It was a necklace that Diego had always worn, with a small heart-shaped pendant. Inside the heart, there was an inscription, "Forever, Mom." Clara stood still, staring at the necklace as if it were a relic. Something inside her began to break even more, as if that small piece of metal could make her relive everything she had lost. "Where did you find it?" Clara asked, her voice cracked, looking at Rosa as if she expected the elderly woman to explain what she couldn't understand. Rosa sighed and began to speak in a low tone, as if every word were heavy. "After the accident, when the police were searching for answers, this necklace appeared near the place where Diego's car had flipped. They thought it was yours, but when they saw the inscription, I knew it didn't belong to a mother, but to a child who had loved his mother very much. I took it because I felt it was meant to be kept, like a sign. And now I'm bringing it to you, because I know this necklace is part of you. It's part of Diego." Clara didn't know how to react. The necklace was there, in front of her, like a bridge between her past and present. It was as if everything she had tried to leave behind, everything she had tried to bury, came rushing back with force, demanding to be remembered. "Why are you bringing it now, Rosa?" Clara asked, her gaze fixed on the necklace. Rosa, with a sigh, stood up from the chair and walked to the window. The evening light illuminated her face, giving her an even wiser look. "Because I know now is the time for you to understand what's really happening, Clara," she said, looking at the young mother. "I know that Camilla carries part of Diego inside her, not just his heart, but his soul in a way. And I also know that you, Clara, need to heal. And in order to heal, you need to let go, even just a little, of everything that is binding you to the pain." Clara fell silent. What Rosa was saying was true. Despite her pain, despite the anger and confusion she felt when looking at Camilla, there was something inside her that desperately longed to find peace. But how could she do it? How could she let go of her son and allow another human being who had lived such a different life to carry his heart and his essence? "I don't know if I can," Clara whispered, closing her eyes for a moment. "I don't know if I'll be able to." Rosa approached and placed a hand on her shoulder with a gentleness that only years of experience could bring. "Life doesn't ask you to do it all at once. You don't need to let go of everything in one go," she said firmly. You just need to open yourself to the idea that even though Diego is no longer here, his love still lives in you, in Camila, in every part of her life. And what you do with that is up to you, Clara. What matters is how you choose to move forward. Rosa's words hung in the air like a truth that Clara still couldn't fully accept. But something, a small spark of hope, began to shine inside her. Perhaps, just perhaps, the path to healing wasn't a straight line, but a journey filled with twists, stumbles, and also moments of peace. That night, Clara sat next to Camila, holding Diego's necklace in her hands. Luna came over and lay at their feet, her presence comforting. Camila looked at her with tenderness, recognizing the suffering they both shared, even if in different ways. "What are we going to do now, Clara?" Camila asked, her eyes filled with an uncertainty that Clara understood well. Clara took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, she felt that she could take a step forward. "We're going to do it together," Clara said as she closed her eyes and clutched Diego's necklace. "We're going to find a way to heal, to live for him." And though the road ahead was still filled with unanswered questions, Clara knew she wasn't alone. For the first time, she felt that by sharing her pain with Camila, something inside her was beginning to heal. The cool morning air gently blew through the open windows of the house. Clara, who had already gotten used to Camila's presence, found herself in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, while her mind wandered to a distant place, a time when Diego was still alive, when mornings didn't start with pain. Now everything seemed different, and although life went on, nothing was the same. Camila had started to feel more comfortable in the house. She was even taking on small responsibilities, like helping with household chores. But there was still something Clara couldn't help but notice, an air of uncertainty surrounding the young woman, as if she herself were searching for her place in the world, struggling to understand her existence amid all the emotional chaos around her. That morning, as Clara set the table, Camila entered the kitchen with a thoughtful expression. She looked different, calmer, as if something in her had changed. Luna, always faithful, followed closely behind, as if watching every one of Camila's movements. "What's going on?" Clara asked, noticing the serious look on the young woman's face. Camila paused for a moment, looking down before lifting her gaze. "Clara, I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, about not trying to be Diego," Camila said, her voice soft but firm. "I think I finally understand. I can't keep living with the weight of his life. I need to live mine, even though I don't really know what that means." Clara looked at her, surprised by the maturity in her words. The young woman had begun to take steps toward her own identity, though she was still searching for answers. Clara felt that, in some way, her words had touched something deep inside her. "It's a good start, Camila," Clara said, smiling warmly. "You don't have to have all the answers right away. But the important thing is that you're searching. You're looking for your own path." Camila nodded slowly, but something in her eyes showed that there was still an internal struggle she couldn't ignore. It was as if the shadows of the past still followed her. "And you?" Camila asked suddenly. "How do you feel?" Clara fell silent for a moment. The question took her by surprise. No one had asked how she was really feeling in a long time. She had always been concerned about Camila, about her own family, but she had never allowed herself to think about herself. "It's hard," Clara finally said, her voice breaking. "There are days when I feel like I'll never get out of this pain. But I also know that in some way I have to keep moving forward. Diego always wanted me to be happy. And even though he's no longer here, his love is here, with me." The silence that followed was comforting. The two women shared a moment of understanding, knowing that, though their paths were different, their hearts were connected by something greater. Diego's loss, Camila's heart, Everything formed an invisible web that united them in a story of suffering, yes, but also of hope. That afternoon, Clara and Camilla decided to take a walk in the park. Spring had begun to show its colors, and the cool air seemed to carry a promise of renewal. Luna, always by their side, ran across the grass, happy to be surrounded by both of them. As they walked, Clara watched Camilla more closely. The young woman, though still filled with questions, was beginning to walk with more confidence. Perhaps she didn't know everything that awaited her, but at least she seemed to have started finding meaning in her life. And though Clara didn't say it aloud, she saw in Camilla an opportunity to heal, an opportunity to somehow fill the void that Diego had left behind. On a bench near the lake, Clara stopped and looked at Camilla. Luna lay at their feet, as if she knew this moment was important. "You know, Camilla," Clara said with a sad smile, "sometimes things don't make sense at first. But in the end, everything falls into place somehow. Diego wouldn't be happy if he saw me getting stuck in the past. I have to learn to live for him, for myself, and for you." Camilla looked at her, her eyes filled with a new understanding. "And I have to learn to live for myself," Camilla said, her eyes shining with a mix of sadness and hope. "Thank you for giving me the chance to do that, Clara, for giving me a place in your life." Clara looked at her intently, as if for a moment she saw Diego in Camilla's eyes. The young woman didn't replace him, but in some way she carried him with her, in the heart that beat in her chest. "Don't worry, Camilla," Clara said softly. "We'll take care of each other. And even though the path won't be easy, I know we'll do it. Together." And in that moment, with the sun beginning to set behind the hills and Luna resting beside them, Clara felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. She wasn't completely healed, but perhaps the healing process would never be about forgetting. Maybe it would be about learning to live with the pain, but also with the hope that, even in the darkness, there could always be a new beginning. And maybe, just maybe, that beginning was right in front of her, in the figure of a young woman named Camilla who carried the heart of her son. The wind had begun to pick up, bringing with it the scent of wet earth that hinted at an impending rain. Clara, standing by the window in the living room, watched the grey horizon, while her thoughts scattered like the clouds gathering in the sky. Though life had begun to reorder itself, the echo of the past remained strong, and there were days when she felt her soul drifting among the shadows of memory. Camilla had changed. It was evident. She was no longer the lost girl she had met months ago, searching for her place in the world. Now there was something in her gaze that seemed more mature, more determined, and yet Clara couldn't help but feel that with each step the young woman took, she was drifting farther from Diego, from that invisible bond that connected them through the transplanted heart. Somehow, Camilla's healing process seemed to parallel Clara's, though indirectly. Luna, as always, followed Camilla everywhere, and that brought Clara a strange sense of comfort. The dog, who had been the last physical connection to her son, had become a kind of guardian between both worlds. It was late at night when Clara decided to go to Camilla's room. There was no clear reason for this decision, just an inexplicable need to check on how the young woman was doing. Perhaps she also wanted to find answers to the questions that had been piling up in her mind. When she opened the door, she found Camilla sitting on her bed, staring at Diego's necklace, the one Clara had kept for so long. The dim light from the bedside lamp softly illuminated her face, and Clara could see that tears were slowly sliding down Camilla's cheeks, though she was trying to hide them. "Camilla," Clara said, surprised by the scene. "What's wrong?" The young woman looked up, and for a moment their eyes met. But she didn't say anything. She just sighed and placed the necklace on the table, as if the weight of that small object was too much for her. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," Camilla said with a broken voice. Every time I look at this necklace, I feel like I'm betraying him, that by carrying Diego's heart, I'm somehow replacing him. I don't know who I am, Clara. I only know that I'm not the same person I was on the street. Clara looked at her, not knowing what to say. Part of her understood what Camilla was feeling because she herself experienced that same confusion. Sometimes she wondered if it was right to move forward, if she could live without that constant feeling of loss. Camilla, Clara said softly, sitting next to her, you're not replacing anyone. You're not Diego. You are you. Camilla looked at her intently, searching for answers in her face. Clara sat beside her, placing her hand on her shoulder, offering a calm that, in a way, she was also seeking for herself. The scar, the heart, all of that doesn't make you someone else. It only means that Diego gave you a chance. Clara continued, her voice firm but filled with tenderness. Your life is not defined by the past. You don't have to carry the shadow of what could have been. You have the right to live your story, Camilla. Your own story. Clara's words struck deep in Camilla, and for a moment it seemed like an invisible weight lifted from her shoulders. The young woman closed her eyes and finally let the tears fall freely, no longer trying to hold them back. "Thank you," she whispered. The silence that followed wasn't the same as before, the uncomfortable silence filled with doubt. Now there was something different, a mutual understanding, a deeper connection. Though the scars of the past remained, Clara felt something inside them begin to heal. That night, as the two of them sat in the room, the rain finally began to fall, gently tapping against the windows. Luna, as always, curled up beside them, resting peacefully, as if she too understood that the world was shifting, even if only in subtle ways. Clara looked at Camilla, and for the first time in a long while, felt a peace she hadn't felt in a while. Not everything had been resolved, and the wound of loss was still open, but there was something she could no longer deny. Her bond with Camilla wasn't just about Diego, but about them, about what they shared, about what they were building together. "You're going to be okay," Clara said, stroking Luna's head. "We both will be." Camilla nodded, a small smile on her face, though still filled with uncertainty. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but now she wasn't alone. And though the shadows of the past would never fully disappear, Clara felt that, for the first time, she had begun to find a way to walk toward the future. And that, even if it was just a small victory, was enough for both of them. The sun was beginning to rise above the mountains, and the golden light filtered through the windows of the house, bathing the living room with a warmth Clara hadn't felt in a long time. Although the pain still cast a persistent shadow, something had changed in her. Something inside her heart had reopened, and now with each breath she felt that life was offering her new possibilities, even though she wasn't ready to fully embrace them yet. Camilla had begun to find her place. She still got lost in her thoughts at times, and the anxiety still lurked. But now, instead of walking alone, Clara was there beside her, giving her the space to heal and grow. Luna, as always, followed her everywhere, and the bond between the two young women grew stronger each day, an almost invisible but powerful connection. That morning, Clara decided it was time to face something she had been postponing. The moment had come to go to the cemetery to visit Diego's grave. For months she had refused to go, fearing that seeing his tomb would make the pain even more unbearable. But now something had changed in her. Maybe she couldn't fully heal, but it was time to pay tribute to her son and let his memory be part of her life, not just a burden she carried. "Camilla, will you come with me?" Clara asked, her voice soft but firm. Camilla looked at her, surprised, but nodded. She understood what that place meant to Clara. It was an important step, not just for her, but for both of them. Together, they got into the car and drove to the cemetery in silence. The road was empty, interrupted only by the soft hum of the engine and the murmur of the radio. Luna, sitting in the back seat, seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. When they arrived, Clara stopped in front of Diego's grave, the small monument marking the spot where her son rested. The white marble seemed colder than she remembered. The date inscribed on the headstone was an unrelenting reminder of what she had lost. But something inside her began to change as she approached. Her breathing slowed and deepened, as if she were preparing her soul for this meeting. "Hello, my son," Clara said quietly, kneeling in front of the grave. The tears began to fall, but they were no longer tears of despair. They were tears of acceptance. "I've missed you so much." Camilla stayed behind, respecting Clara's space, but watching attentively. She knew this was a sacred moment for her, and although she couldn't fully understand what Clara was feeling, she felt she was part of something deeply personal, something much bigger than themselves. Clara stayed there for several minutes, speaking to Diego in her mind, allowing the pain to flow, but also letting peace begin to filter through the cracks in her broken heart. When she finally stood up, she saw that Camilla was slowly approaching, with a serious expression, but with a tenderness Clara hadn't expected. "May I place something on his grave?" Camilla asked timidly. Clara looked at her, surprised, and nodded. Camilla crouched down, and from her pocket she took out a small white flower, simple yet full of meaning. With a delicate gesture, she placed it next to Diego's headstone. "He's always been here, in my heart, ever since he gave me his life," Camilla said, not looking at Clara. "I want you to know that, even though I didn't know him, I will always be grateful to him for giving me the chance to live." Clara looked at her, and for the first time, she didn't feel like Camilla was just a reminder of what she had lost. In that moment, she saw a young woman with her own path, with her own struggles and dreams, but also a human being who shared a unique connection with Diego. Camilla wasn't just carrying his heart, she had also found a way to honor his memory. "Thank you, Camilla," Clara said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Thank you for being here, for giving me strength, for being with me." The young woman looked up, smiling with a mix of sadness and hope. "I promise, Clara, I won't forget him. I'll never forget him." They stayed there for a while, in silence, feeling the weight of Diego's presence in the air. And although the pain was still a part of them, Clara began to understand that it wasn't always necessary to stop feeling the loss in order to move forward. Sometimes love was the answer, and love never disappears. It transforms, reinvents itself, and leads to new beginnings. When they got home, the afternoon was beginning to fall. The day had been long, but full of moments of revelation. Clara looked at Camilla as she settled into the armchair, Luna lying at her feet. Maybe there was still a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, Clara felt she had taken a step toward acceptance. And although Diego was no longer with her, his memory would stay alive. Not only in her heart, but also in Camilla's life, who in some way was now part of her family. The scar of loss would never disappear, but Clara knew that, in the end, life always finds ways to heal, even through the darkness. And maybe, just maybe, her son's love could live on in someone else. That night, as the lights went out, Clara lay in her bed with a feeling of calm. Maybe the future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt that the present was enough. And so we reach the end of this profound and emotional story. Clara and Camilla's journey shows us how, even in the greatest losses, life can surprise us with new forms of love and healing. How do you think Clara will face the next challenges alongside Camilla? Will she ever be able to live without the constant weight of Diego's loss, or will her love for him always be a shadow? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to keep enjoying more heartwarming stories like this. And make sure to activate the notification bell so you won't miss any of our new videos. We're always bringing content that touches the heart and makes us reflect on life, loss, and second chances. Now tell us, do you think Camilla has truly found her place in life, or is she still searching for her own identity? Let's talk about it in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us. We'll see you in the next video, and may life, although difficult, always offer us a path of hope.